The British Crime Survey, BCS, provides an important source of information about levels of crime, public attitudes to crime, and other related issues. The results play an important role in informing Home Office policy. The BCS measures the amount of crime in England and Wales by asking people about crimes they have experienced in the last year. This includes crimes not reported to the police, so it is an important alternative to police records. Victims do not report crime for various reasons, and without the BCS there would be no official source of information on these unreported crimes. Because members of the public are asked directly about their experiences, the survey also provides a consistent measure of crime that is unaffected by the extent to which crimes are reported to the police, or by changes in the criteria used by the police when recording crime. The age-old question of whether human traits are determined by nature or nurture has been answered, a team of researchers say. Their conclusion? It's a draw. By collating almost every twin study across the world from the past 50 years, researchers determined that the average variation for human traits and disease is 49% due to genetic factors and 51% due to environmental factors. University of Queensland researcher Beben Benjamin from the Queensland Brain Institute collaborated with researchers at VU University of Amsterdam to collate 2,748 studies involving more than 14.5 million pairs of twins. Twin studies have been conducted for more than 50 years, but there is still some debate in terms of how much the variation is due to genetic or environmental factors, Benjamin said. He said the study showed the conversation should move away from nature versus nature, instead looking at how the two work together. Both are important sources of variation between individuals, he said. While the studies averaged an almost even split between nature and nurture, there was wide variation within the 17,800 separate traits and diseases examined by the studies. For example, the risk for bipolar disorder was found to be 68% due to genetics and only 32% due to environmental factors. Weight maintenance was 63% due to genetics and 37% due to environmental factors. In contrast, risk for eating disorders was found to be 40% genetic and 60% environmental. Psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior, according to the American Psychological Association. Psychology is a multifaceted discipline and includes many subfields of study such areas as human development, sports, health, clinical, social behavior, and cognitive processes. Psychology is really a very new science, with most advances happening over the past 150 years or so. However, its origins can be traced back to ancient Greece, 400 to 500 years BC. Philosophers used to discuss many topics now studied by modern psychology, such as memory, free will versus determinism, nature versus nurture, attraction, etc. In the early days of psychology, there were two dominant theoretical perspectives regarding how the brain worked: structuralism and functionalism. Jobs generated by travel and tourism are spread across the economy in retail, construction, manufacturing, and telecommunications, as well as directly in travel and tourism companies. These jobs employ a large proportion of women, minorities, and young people, are predominantly in small and medium-sized companies, and offer good training and transferability. Tourism can also be one of the most effective drivers for the development of regional economies. These patterns apply to both developed and emerging economies. There are numerous good examples of where travel and tourism is acting as a catalyst for conservation and improvement of the environment, and maintenance of local diversity and culture. Nobody really disputes the idea that the demand for talent-intensive skills is rising. The value of intangible assets, everything from skilled workers to patents to know-how, has ballooned from 20% of the value of companies in the S&P 500 to 70% today. The proportion of American workers doing jobs that call for complex skills has grown 3 times as fast as employment in general. As other economies move in the same direction, global demand is rising quickly. As for supply, the picture in much of the developed world is haunted by demography. By 2025, the number of people aged 15 to 64 is projected to fall by 7% in Germany, 9% in Italy, and 14% in Japan. Some of this panic is overdone and linked to the business cycle. There was much ado about war for talent in America in the 1990s, until the dot-com bubble burst. People often talk about shortages when they should really be discussing price. Eventually, supply will rise to meet demand and the market will adjust. But, while you wait, your firm might go bust. The evidence is that the talent shortage is likely to get worse. The first is the collapse of loyalty. Companies happily chopped out layers of managers during the 1990s, now people are likely to repay them by moving to the highest bidder. The second is the mismatch between what schools are producing and what companies need. In April 2008, the British government announced that, henceforth, all human remains archaeologically excavated in England and Wales should be reburied after a 2-year period of scientific analysis. Not only would internationally important prehistoric remains have to be returned to the ground, removing them from public view, but also there would no longer be any possibility of long-term scientific investigation as new techniques and methods emerged and developed in the future. Thus, while faunal remains, potsherds, artifacts, and environmental samples could be analyzed and reanalyzed in future years, human remains were to be effectively removed from the curation process. Archaeologists and other scientists were also concerned that this might be the first step towards a policy of reburying all human remains. The history of marketers seeking the advice of physicists is a short one, but an understanding of the theory of resonance may give communications experts the edge. Resonance theory explains the curious phenomenon of how very small pebbles dropped into a pond can create bigger waves than a large brick. The brick makes a decent splash, but its ripples peter out quickly. A tiny pebble dropped into the same pond, followed by another, then another, then another, all timed carefully, will create ripples that build into small waves. As Dr. Carlo Contaldi, a physicist at Imperial College London, explains, a small amount of energy committed at just the right intervals, the natural frequency, creates a cumulatively large effect. Media consultant Paul Bay believes that just as with the pebbles in a pond, a carefully choreographed and meticulously timed stream of communication will have a more lasting effect than a sporadic big splash during primetime ad breaks. Innocent is a testament to the power of pebbles. Until last year, the maker of smoothies had never advertised on TV, instead of drip-feeding the market with endless ingenious marketing ploys, from annotating its drinks' labels with quirky messages to hosting its own music festival, Fruitstock. The company sent a constant stream of messages rather than communicating through the occasional big and expensive noise. So whether you're trying to make waves in the laboratory or in the media, the people in white coats would advise a little and often. Spurred by the sense that disorderly behavior among students in South Euclid was increasing, the School Resource Officer, SRO, reviewed data regarding referrals to the principal's office. He found that the high school reported thousands of referrals a year for bullying and that the junior high school had recently experienced a 30% increase in bullying referrals. Police data showed that juvenile complaints about disturbances, bullying, and assaults after school hours had increased 90% in the past 10 years. A researcher from Kent State University, Ohio, conducted a survey of all students attending junior high and high school. Interviews and focus groups were conducted with a student identified as victims or offender teachers, and guidance counselors. Finally, the South Euclid Police Department purchased a geographic information system to conduct crime incident mapping of hotspots within the schools. The main findings pointed to 4 primary areas of concern: the environmental design of the school, teacher knowledge of and response to the problem, parental attitudes and responses, and student perspectives and behaviors. The SRO worked in close collaboration with a social worker and the university researcher. They coordinated a response planning team comprising many stakeholders that were intended to respond to each of the areas identified in the initial analysis. Environmental changes included modifying the school schedule and increasing teacher supervision of hotspots. Counselors and social workers conducted teacher training courses in conflict resolution and bullying prevention. Parent education included mailings with information about bullying, an explanation of the new school policy, and a discussion about what could be done at home to address the problems. Finally, student education included classroom discussions between homeroom teachers and students, as well as assemblies conducted by the SRO. The SRO also opened a substation next to a primary hotspot. The Ohio Department of Education contributed by opening a new training center to provide a non-traditional setting for specialized help. The results from the various responses were dramatic. School suspensions decreased by 40%. Bullying incidents dropped 60% in the hallways and 80% in the gym area. Follow-up surveys indicated that there were positive attitudinal changes among students about bullying and that more students felt confident that teachers would take action when a problem arose. Teachers indicated that training sessions were helpful and that they were more likely to talk about bullying as a serious issue. Parents responded positively, asking for more information about the problem in future mailings. The overall results suggest that the school environments were not only safer but that early intervention was helping at-risk students succeed in school. South Euclid, Ohio, Police Department, 2001.
Shakespeare scholars from almost 50 countries will gather at King's College London next week as the university co-hosts the 10th World Shakespeare Congress to explore and honor the bard's life and work. Organized by the International Shakespeare Association, ISA, the World Congress is held every 5 years, and 2016 is the first time it will be co-hosted in 2 locations that were integral to both the personal and working life of William Shakespeare. Delegates will arrive in London on Thursday following the start of the Congress on Sunday in Stratford-upon-Avon. With the main theme of creating and recreating Shakespeare, the Congress will look at the continuing global relevance of Shakespeare's work through a varied program of plenaries, panels, seminars, and workshops. As war spreads to many corners of the globe, children sadly have been drawn into the center of conflicts. In Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Colombia, however, groups of children have been taking part in peace education projects. The children, after learning to resolve conflicts, took on the role of peacemakers. The children's movement for peace in Colombia was even nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1998. Groups of children acting as peacemakers studied human rights and poverty issues. Assuming images role projects comprehensive acting. There is an academic consensus that gunpowder was initially invented in China as early as the 9th century. This led to its use in fireworks and in gunpowder weapons. Many people like to learn a new language. Exciting as it sounds, to achieve the proficiency it can take a lot of efforts. There are multiple stages before a person can be said to be a language expert. First of all, the person should set a few short-term goals and narrow the focus on the most basic part. Every language uses grammar, which creates its skeleton. If a person learns the grammar, it's half job done. After that, learning to use the right words is very important, because a word can be used in a variety of connotations at different places. Having a pal or a friend who speaks that language makes the task easier, so that errors could be rectified instantly. When you understand at least 40% of the words and sentences, listening to the programs and news in that language can also help immensely. Almost no one regards corn with suspicion. But the same can't be said for humans' ingenious ability to engineer the plants we eat. Genetically modified, GM, crops are viewed with such hostility that they are barely grown in Europe. However, a new study by an independent group of scientists, who have done the most comprehensive review of the evidence so far, shows that our aversion to GM food is pointless, unscientific, and harmful to farmers. Research is a process of investigation leading to new insights effectively shared and is central to the purpose of any university. Students have the right to be taught by acknowledged experts in their field, which requires that staff members operate at the most advanced level appropriate to their discipline and level. Research is, therefore, crucial to a positive student experience from further education to doctoral development. Studies of pine martens in Scotland have shown that the diet varies seasonally, with small mammals, berries, and small birds being the main foods. Recent work on a plantation has shown that martens establish their home ranges in areas dominated by forests and dense shrubs. Within home ranges, martens utilize areas of grassy vegetation within the forest which are typically associated with microdus voles, for which a strong selective preference over other small mammals is shown. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, or nightmare, millions of honeybees suddenly dying off, their bodies never found. Scientists have named the phenomenon colony collapse disorder, but they aren't united on the reason. A surprising number of writers, even those who have thought of their writing as self-expression, have sought a freedom from the tyranny of subjectivity, echoing Goethe's claim that every healthy effort is directed from the inward to the outward world. From time to time, others have risen to defend commitment, engagement, involvement. But, at least until recently, the predominant demand in this century has been for some sort of objectivity. As research has shown, emotions are contagious. And empaths are especially sensitive to others' emotional energies. Because they're so attuned to others. They can get easily exhausted in crowds, be drawn into codependent relationships, exhaust themselves trying to solve others' problems, or burn out from too much caregiving. Many utopias have been dreamed up through the ages. From Plato's Republic to Thomas More's Utopia and beyond, serious thinkers have envisioned societies where people live in peace and harmony. Most of these imaginary worlds have things in common. Everybody is equal and plays a part in the running of the society. Nobody goes without the essentials of life. People live mostly off the land. Often there is no money, and so on. Another thing they have in common is that, to the average person, they appear distasteful or unworkable since they do not take into account ordinary human nature or feelings. Architects have got in on the act, too. After the Great Fire of London, Christopher Wren drew up plans for a reconstruction of the whole city.
And in the 20th century there was Le Corbusier's radiant city in which, if you weren't in a car, or didn't have one, life would have been a nightmare. Also in the 20th century, another famous architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, dreamed up a perfect city that got no further than the drawing board. Wright believed that what was wrong with modern cities was, in his words, rent. Ideas, land, even money itself, had to be paid for. He saw this as a form of slavery and believed that modern city dwellers had no sense of themselves as productive individuals. Thus, Wright's city was to be made up of numerous individual homesteads, and the houses themselves were to be simple, functional, and in harmony with the environment. Everyone would own enough land to grow food for himself and his family. Marriage is a big step in anyone's life, and there is an argument to be made against getting married too early. As any newlywed couple knows, there is a huge amount of financial pressure associated with marriage. Firstly, the wedding reception and honeymoon cost you an arm and a leg. Then there's the matter of home loans, rent and energy bills. If you're looking to start a family, your child's education is another thing you need to save up for. Teenagers should probably find a proper job before deciding to tie the knot. A letter from a mother to school officials. Because her son was sick at home, and she explained his illness to them, saying she did not want his son to spread the disease to other children. She hoped that the authorities would be able to pass on lessons to his son during this period. A flower's color, however, isn't a foolproof guide to a good lunch. That's because the color can change depending on the angle at which sunlight hits its petals. A yellow flower, for example, may look somewhat blue from one angle and red from another. Scientists call this kind of color change iridescence. It's the same phenomenon that makes a rainbow appear in a soap bubble or on a CD, says Beverly Glover. She studies plants at the University of Cambridge in England. In 2009, Glover and her colleagues showed that even when petals look shimmery, bees can still tell which flowers likely hold food. But she and others noticed something odd about iridescence. It's not quite as flashy in plants as in other life forms, Glover says. The backs of jewel beetles or the wings of certain butterflies, for instance, shine and shimmer a lot more. Scientists around the world are racing to learn how to rapidly diagnose, treat, and stop the spread of a new, deadly disease. SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, was detected for the first time in February 2003 in Hanoi, and since then has infected more than 1,600 people in 15 countries, killing 63. At this point, there are more questions than answers surrounding the disease. Symptoms start with a fever over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, chills, headache or body aches. Within a week, the patient has a dry cough, which might progress to shortness of breath. In 10% to 20% of cases, patients require mechanical ventilation to breathe. About 3.5% die from the disease.
height is correlated with a lot of things. Up to a certain height, taller people make more money than the flatly challenged. And the taller residential candidate almost always wins. Now a study finds that your height as an adult has a profound effect on your perception of your health. Short people judge their health to be worse than average, or tall people judge theirs. The research was published in the journal Clinical Endocrinology. Data for the study came from the 2003 Health Survey for England. More than 14,000 participants filled out questions and had their heights measured. The study only looked at how good the subject thought his or her health was, not their actual health.
Questions focused on 5 areas: mobility, self-care, normal activities, pain or disgrace, and anxiety or depression. Men shorter than about 5 feet 4 and women shorter than 5 feet reported the worst impressions. But small increases in height at the low end had much bigger effect on perception than the same increase among taller people. Other studies have shown, ironically, that shorter people on average actually live longer. A postal article, not the postal article. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, an article in English is a verb that precedes a noun, and simply indicates specificity. This sounds quite complicated, and to be honest, it's quite complicated to say without spraying everyone within 15 feet, but the concept's quite simple.
The development of methods of learning in humans is a complex topic that involves various social and cognitive processes. Lalonde's work primarily focuses on areas such as social learning, cultural evolution, and niche construction. According to Lalonde and the emerging consensus among researchers in the field, the key to humanity's unique capacity for acquiring knowledge and skills lies in our ability to learn from other individuals within our social communities. Humans build upon a reservoir of shared knowledge through iterative processes, enabling the creation of increasingly efficient and diverse solutions to life's challenges. This process of communal knowledge acquisition and accumulation is a fundamental aspect of human culture, and it sets us apart from other animals.
Why and to what extent should parents control their children's TV watching? There is certainly nothing inherently wrong with TV. The problem is how much television a child watches and what effect it has on his life. Research has shown that as the amount of time spent watching TV goes up, the amount of time devoted not only to homework and study but other important aspects of life such as social development and physical activities decreases. Television is bound to have a tremendous impact on a child, both in terms of how many hours a week he watches TV and of what he sees. When a parent is concerned about the effects of television, he should consider a number of things: what TV offers the child in terms of information and knowledge, how many hours a week a youngster his age should watch television,